In the vast, lonely stretches of North Dakota, the wind tells stories. It whispers across endless fields of wheat and rustles through the tall prairie grass. Out here the sky is big, and the towns are small. People know their neighbors, they trust them. It was a place built on hard work and quiet faith. The land was tough, but the people were tougher. They built their homes from the earth, and their lives from sheer will. This was a world of long winters and even longer horizons, where secrets could be buried deep, just like the foundations of a farmhouse. And one particular farmhouse, near the small town of Niagara, held a secret darker than anyone could ever imagine. The house itself was ordinary. A simple wooden structure, weathered by years of sun and snow. It stood as a silent witness to the changing seasons and the passing of time. For years it was just another landmark on the flat landscape, the former home of a man everyone knew. His name was Eugene Butler. He was a farmer, a wealthy man but also a strange one. People in the area had their stories about him, tales of his odd habits and his solitary life. But those stories were just the beginning. The real story was hidden beneath the floorboards, waiting in the darkness for someone to find it. After Butler died, the house sat empty. It became a relic of a bygone era, a place kids might dare each other to approach on a moonless night. The paint peeled, the windows grew cloudy with dust, and the fields around it were tended by new hands. The memory of Eugene Butler, the eccentric old farmer, began to fade, just another ghost on the prairie. No one had any reason to disturb the quiet of his old home. No one suspected that the silence within its walls was the silence of the grave. The truth was buried, locked away in the cold, damp earth below the house. But secrets have a way of coming to the surface, especially the most terrible ones. The story of Eugene Butler wasn't over. It had simply paused. The final chapter was waiting to be written, and it would not be a story of farming or fortune. It would be a story of horror, a tale that would shatter the peace of this quiet community. The wind that blew across the prairie was about to carry a new, more sinister tale. A tale that started with a simple task: cleaning out an old, forgotten basement. A task that would uncover a nightmare. The year was 1915. A full decade had passed since Eugene Butler had been taken from his home. New owners had taken over the property, ready to make it their own. The farmhouse needed work, a lot of work. One of the first jobs was to clear out the basement. It was a dark, musty space, filled with the accumulated junk of a lifetime. Old tools, broken furniture, and layers of dirt and grime. It was a dirty job, but a necessary one. The men hired to do the work had no idea what they were about to step into. They were just there to dig out a root cellar, to make the space usable again. As their shovels bit into the hard-packed dirt floor, they hit something that wasn't rock or wood. It made a dull, unsettling sound. They dug carefully around the object, curiosity mixing with a growing sense of unease. Slowly, they unearthed it. It was a bone, a human bone, and then another, and another. Panic began to set in. This was not an animal carcass or some old forgotten relic. This was something else entirely. They had stumbled upon a grave, right here, in the cellar of this quiet farmhouse. A hidden, unmarked grave. The workers scrambled out of the basement, their faces pale with shock. They immediately called for the sheriff. The news spread like wildfire through the small community of Niagara. The Butler place? Skeletons in the basement? It seemed impossible. Like something out of a penny dreadful novel. Not real life in rural North Dakota. The sheriff and his deputies arrived, their expressions grim. They descended into the dark cellar, their lanterns casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. What they found would confirm the workers' terrifying discovery, and then some. It was a scene of unimaginable horror. It wasn't just one body. As they continued to dig, the full scope of the nightmare was revealed. The remains of 6 people were buried in that shallow earthen grave. 6 human skeletons tangled together in the cold dirt beneath the house. Who were they? How did they get there? And who had put them there? All eyes, all thoughts, turned to the only person it could have been. The strange, reclusive man who had lived in this house for so many years. The man they called the Midnight Rider. Eugene Butler. The community was stunned. The man they knew was odd, but a monster? So, who was this man, Eugene Butler? His story didn't begin in North Dakota. He was an outsider, born in New York in 1853. Like many others of his time, he was drawn to the promise of the West. He sought a new life, a chance to make his fortune on the untamed frontier. He arrived in North Dakota in the early 1880s, a young man full of ambition. He was smart and hardworking, and he saw opportunity where others saw only empty land. He bought a plot of ground near Niagara and set to work, determined to build an empire from the soil. And for a time, he succeeded. Eugene Butler was not just a farmer. He was a shrewd businessman. He understood the land and the markets. His farm flourished, growing larger and more prosperous with each passing year. He became one of the wealthiest men in the county, a respected figure in the community. He was known for his intelligence and his sharp mind. People looked up to him. He was a success story, a testament to what a man could achieve with grit and determination on the American prairie. He had everything a man could want: wealth, land, and respect. But as the years went by, something inside Eugene Butler began to change. The successful farmer started to become a recluse. He never married. He had no children. He lived entirely alone in his big farmhouse, surrounded by his wealth but isolated from the world. People began to notice his behavior growing stranger. He became paranoid, suspicious of everyone around him. He trusted no one and kept to himself, his interactions with neighbors becoming rare and often tense. The man who had once been a pillar of the community was slowly turning into its biggest mystery. The wealth he had worked so hard to accumulate seemed to bring him no comfort. Instead, it seemed to fuel his paranoia. He was convinced that people were trying to steal from him, that his neighbors were plotting against him. He installed heavy locks on his doors and windows, turning his home into a fortress. He was a man living in a prison of his own making, a prison of fear and suspicion. The bright promise of his early years was dimming, replaced by a growing darkness that no one could quite understand. The successful farmer was disappearing, and a much stranger figure was taking his place. As his isolation deepened, Eugene Butler earned a nickname. The locals started calling him the Midnight Rider. The name came from his most peculiar habit. Late at night, long after the rest of the world was asleep, Butler would saddle his horse. He would then ride for hours across the dark and empty prairie. He rode without a destination, a solitary figure moving through the moonlit landscape. No one knew why he did it. Was he checking his property lines? Was he simply unable to sleep, or was it something else? Something driven by the growing turmoil in his mind. These nightly rides only added to his mystique. He became a local legend, a ghost story parents might tell their children. Imagine seeing him out there, a dark silhouette against the starry sky, moving silently across the plains. It was an unsettling image. His neighbors grew wary of him. They saw his strange behavior not just as eccentric, but as potentially threatening. The man who rode alone in the dead of night was not a man you wanted to cross. His paranoia was well known, and his temper could be fierce if he felt he was being wronged. Butler's paranoia wasn't just about his land or his money. It extended to everything. He was known to carry a shotgun with him wherever he went, even when doing simple farm chores. He saw threats everywhere. He would shout at people who came too close to his property, accusing them of being thieves or spies. His interactions became so hostile that people learned to simply avoid him and his farm altogether. The Butler place became an island, cut off from the surrounding community by a sea of fear and mistrust, all of it created by the man who lived there. The Midnight Rider was a man haunted by his own mind. The silence of the prairie can do strange things to a person. For some, it brings peace. For Eugene Butler, it seemed to amplify the noise inside his head. The vast emptiness outside was a mirror for the growing emptiness inside. He was a man completely alone with his thoughts, and his thoughts were turning dark. His nightly rides were not a quest for freedom, but perhaps an attempt to escape himself, an escape that he would never find. The darkness he was riding through was nothing compared to the darkness that was consuming him. Well, the years of isolation really took their toll. Eugene Butler's eccentricities slowly spiraled into what appeared to be a severe mental breakdown. His behavior became more and more erratic and, more disconnected from reality. He stopped taking care of himself, and while his farm, the once prosperous property, fell into disrepair. Fields went unplowed, fences collapsed, and the farmhouse itself began to look, neglected. The man who had been so meticulous about his business was now living in squalor, seemingly oblivious to the decay that was setting in all around him. It was a sad, visible sign of the decay happening within his mind. His paranoia reached extreme levels. He boarded up windows and barricaded doors, convinced that an army of enemies was poised to attack him. He would sometimes be seen shouting at unseen figures in his fields, brandishing his shotgun at phantoms only he could see. He accused his neighbors of poisoning his well and stealing his livestock. His accusations grew wilder and more baseless. The community, once respectful of him, now viewed him with a mixture of pity and fear. It was clear to everyone that Eugene Butler was a man who was seriously unwell. The final straw came in 1905. His behavior had become so alarming that the authorities could no longer ignore it. He was a danger to himself and potentially to others. Concerned neighbors reported his increasingly bizarre actions, and the local sheriff was forced to intervene. They found Butler living in filth, ranting about conspiracies and threats. He was incoherent, lost in his own terrifying world. There was no reasoning with him. The decision was made for his own safety and for the safety of the community. He had to be removed from the farm. A judge declared Eugene Butler insane. He was committed to the North Dakota State Hospital for the insane in Jamestown. It was a sad end to the story of the once great farmer. He was taken from his home, the place he had built from nothing, and locked away. For the people of Niagara, it was a relief. The strange and frightening man was gone. The Butler place fell silent. The midnight rider would ride no more. They thought the story was over. They thought the strange chapter of Eugene Butler had finally come to a close. They were wrong. Eugene Butler spent the last years of his life inside the walls of the state mental hospital. The asylum in Jamestown was a world away from his sprawling farm. It was a place of routine, of locked doors and watchful attendants. The freedom of the open prairie was replaced by the confinement of a small room. For a man who had been the master of his own universe, it must have been a crushing blow. We don't know much about his time there. The records are sparse. We can only imagine him, a once powerful man, now just another patient, his mind lost in a fog of delusions. He lived in the asylum for nearly 2 decades. Did he ever speak of his life on the farm? Did he hint at the secrets hidden in his basement? It seems not. If he did, no one listened, or no one believed him. He was just another patient with a fractured mind, his words dismissed as the ramblings of a madman. The secrets he carried remained locked inside him, as securely as he was locked inside the institution. He was a man with a past, a dark, terrible past, but to the doctors and nurses, he was just a case study in mental decline. Eugene Butler died in the asylum in 1923. He was around 70 years old. His death was unremarkable. He was buried in the asylum cemetery, his grave marked with a simple number, not a name. He died alone, far from the land he had once ruled. His fortune, which he had guarded so fiercely, was left behind. His farm had already been sold off years before when he was first committed. With his death, the story of the strange farmer from Niagara seemed to be well and truly over. He was gone, and soon he would be forgotten. But death does not always mean the end of the story. Sometimes, it is only the beginning. Eugene Butler was dead, but the house where he had lived still stood. The secrets it held were still there, waiting. His death in the asylum closed one chapter, but it also set the stage for the next, most horrifying one. The man was gone, but his legacy remained. Not the legacy of a wealthy farmer, but the legacy of a killer. A legacy written in bone, buried in the dark, damp earth of his cellar. Back in the basement of the Butler farmhouse, the sheriff and his team worked under the dim light of lanterns. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and the chilling reality of their discovery. The initial shock gave way to the grim task of excavation. Carefully, they brushed away the dirt, revealing the full extent of what lay beneath. It was a mass grave. The skeletons of 6 individuals were jumbled together in a pit that was roughly 7 feet long and 3 feet deep. It was a crude, shallow burial, dug directly into the cellar floor. The scene was gruesome. The bodies had been placed in the grave without care. There were no coffins, no burial shrouds, not even clothes. They were just bones, tangled together. The investigation determined that all the victims were men. They had likely been hired hands, itinerant workers who drifted from farm to farm looking for work. These were the kinds of men who could disappear without anyone noticing. They, often, had no family, no roots, and no one to report them missing. They were the perfect victims, invisible in life, and now, anonymous in death. How did they die? The condition of the skeletons offered few clues, but the most logical theory was that Butler had killed them one by one. Perhaps he had lured them to his farm with the promise of work. Maybe arguments over pay or paranoid delusions led to violence. One chilling detail suggested the killer's method. A heavy, handmade club was found near the grave. It was a brutal, simple weapon. It was easy to imagine the reclusive Butler, in a fit of rage or paranoia, using such a tool to commit his terrible deeds. He would then drag the bodies to the cellar and bury them, hiding his crimes from the world. The discovery sent a wave of horror through North Dakota and beyond. Newspapers picked up the story, calling the Butler farmhouse a murder farm. The man they had known as an eccentric recluse was now being called a mass murderer, a Bluebeard of the plains. The community was left to grapple with a terrible truth. A monster had lived among them for years. He had looked like a successful farmer, a man of means, but beneath that facade was a cold-blooded killer who had turned his own home into a tomb. The biggest question remained: who were the victims? The authorities faced an impossible task. In the early 20th century, there was no DNA testing, no advanced forensic science. Identifying skeletons was incredibly difficult, especially when the victims were likely transient workers with no records. The sheriff put out calls, hoping someone might come forward with information about a missing brother, or son, or friend who had been in the Niagara area years ago, but no one did. The trail was cold, more than a decade old. The victims remained nameless. They were just 6 skeletons in a box, their identities lost to time. They had come to North Dakota seeking work, a chance at a better life, and had instead found a brutal end in a dark cellar. Their stories died with them. We will never know their names, their hopes, or their dreams. They are the forgotten victims of a forgotten crime. Their fate serves as a stark reminder of how easily people on the margins of society can disappear, their absence going unnoticed and unmourned. They were phantoms, even before they were ghosts. With the victims unidentified and the only suspect, Eugene Butler, already dead, the case hit a wall. There could be no trial, no conviction, no justice in a courtroom. The discovery of the bodies was both the beginning and the end of the investigation. The community was left with the horrifying knowledge of what had happened, but with no way to resolve it. The story, as shocking as it was, began to fade from the headlines. Life on the prairie moved on. There were crops to plant, winters to survive. The tale of the Butler murder farm became another dark legend, a chilling story to be told on cold nights. Over time, the details blurred. The story was passed down, but it lost its sharp edges. It became a piece of local folklore rather than an active, criminal case. The remote, rural location contributed to its obscurity. In the vast, sparsely populated landscape of North Dakota, it was easier for such a story to get lost. There were no grieving families demanding answers, no ongoing police investigation to keep it in the public eye. The murder farm on the prairie slowly sank back into the silence of the plains, its terrible secrets only half remembered. Why does the story of Eugene Butler, the forgotten basement butcher, still matter today? It is more than just a macabre piece of local history. It is a story that touches on timeless themes that are as relevant now as they were a century ago. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation. Eugene Butler cut himself off from the world, and in that solitude, his inner demons festered and grew. The story forces us to ask what happens when people become disconnected from their community, when their cries for help are mistaken for mere eccentricity. The case also shines a light on the complex relationship between mental illness and violence. Butler was clearly a deeply disturbed man. His descent from a respected businessman to a paranoid recluse is a tragic story in its own right. His case highlights the devastating consequences of untreated mental health issues, especially in a time and place where such things were poorly understood and heavily stigmatized. We are left to wonder if intervention could have changed the course of this story. Could his life and the lives of his victims have been saved? And finally, the story of Eugene Butler is a haunting reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight. It happened in a quiet, peaceful place, a place where people thought they were safe. It reminds us that evil is not confined to big cities or dark alleys. It can be found anywhere, even in a simple farmhouse on the prairie, behind the face of a neighbor. The 6 nameless men in Butler's basement are a testament to the forgotten victims of crime, the people who disappear without a trace, their stories never told. The wind still blows across the plains of North Dakota. The Butler farmhouse is long gone, vanished back into the earth. But the story remains, an echo in the silence. It is a chilling chapter in the history of rural America, a tale of wealth, madness, and murder. It asks us to look closer at the quiet places, to listen more carefully to the whispers on the wind, and to never forget the victims who lie in unmarked graves. Because sometimes, the most terrifying stories are the true ones, and they are often the ones that have been forgotten.